Hey everyone, this video is installation of the HydrosPlus Cooler Plus, which you see here, and all of the accessories that are going to come with it. But before you watch this too far, I mean watch it if you like, I want you to know this is for the later model 1 Series as well as the 2nd Gen 2025R. Somewhere around 2014 they changed to a different hydraulic cooler that looks like this. So this is how you're going to know if this video is for you. Pop your hood, look at the front of your tractor just above your battery. If your hydraulic cooler looks like this, you won't be able to see this because it's pointing downward. But if it looks like this, then this is the video for you. If it does not look like this, and you have a 1 Series, 1026, 23 or 25 up to around 2015, there'll be another video. Once that video is ready, I will also link it here, or you can search for it. Now, the cooler portion of this will be the same. It's the plumbing piece that is going to be different for the earlier model tractors. So before we get started, before we get into the shop and I show you how this is installed, I did think it was worth looking at what is actually going to be in the box. Of course, somebody may do an unboxing video. Those are not terribly exciting to me, and I usually don't watch them, but it is good to know what you should expect in the box, so they do serve a good purpose, I think. HydrosPlus Cooler Plus, this thing is significantly larger. If you take a look at it from comparison of this one, it's about 2 times wider as far as front surface area, and I would argue it's probably 3.5 to 4 times thicker. This one will add about 2 quarts of capacity to your tractor. So that's one of the secrets to getting a significant increase in cooling capacity. And all of these extra fins in the surface area, that's going to bring the temperature down even more. I've been running this for a few months. Very pleased with the performance of it, much better than I even expected. I've got some videos, maybe I'll put a link to those as well, showing this compared to the stock cooler, and probably the most rigorous test you can imagine, which is basically just run it over the pressure relief valve, and also, by the way, increase your pressure up to 2600 psi, and do that constantly for an hour and see what happens. For this, I think in an hour we got to about 150 degrees. The stock cooler did not make it an hour. It made it to about 40 minutes. We're well over 200 degrees. At that same mark for this particular, for the tractor we were testing on, this cooler was at 138 to 140. So there's a 75 degree spread between what this was capable of and what the stock one was capable of, and it had seemed so this had leveled off. I didn't go long enough to be 100% sure of that, but it was pretty close to being leveled off. I was certain of that. Now, I've told you all of that. I am going to get to the install portion of it and kind of stick to that, and I'm not going to take you through every single step, so I want to try to keep this relatively short, but it is important, I think, that I tell you why we have this. And if you just now are learning about HydrosPlus and you haven't been following along for a while, you might think that the reason we want to add a cooler is because by adding hydraulic flow and capacity, we're going to add heat. And while that can be true, it is not true for HydrosPlus. Every test we've done has shown HydrosPlus to be, I would say, the same as stock. Every test I've actually done has been always cooler, sometimes 1 to 2 degrees, sometimes 8 to 10 degrees. So I still think that's probably within the margin of error. 5 is definitely within the margin of error. But all that to say, this is not because we have more hydraulic flow, and this isn't required if you want to have HydrosPlus and more flow, as long as you're okay with running the same temperatures that you would run right off the showroom floor. So what is the why for this, right? Now that we have more hydraulic flow, we have the ability to run some continuously running hydraulic implements, maybe on the back, but most likely on the front. Flail mowers, brooms, power rakes, those type of implements are things that a lot of people are asking for. We are bringing those to the market in a smaller package than what you see on things like skid steers. Of course, they're not going to be directly comparable to a $70,000 skid steer with high flow hydraulics, but for people who need to sweep their street, sweep their driveway, they're doing lawns as a part of landscaping, all of these implements are really desirable for a lot of the customers. So that's the reason I wanted to bring this to market. And so far, there'll be more videos, and this is where I'll stop. Continuous run, flail mower and bush hog that I've been running, I've run them up to an hour in 60, 65 degree weather. The highest temperature I recorded on the bush hog was 125 degrees, and on the flail mower it was even less than that, but I think it was a little bit cooler. So that's enough for the intro here. I will put some chapters in here so you can jump right over this, but let's talk about what's in the box. HydrosPlus Cooler Plus. Again, this will be for the 1 series, I'll call them 2nd gen, the later model 1 series as well as the 2nd gen 2025R. The same cooler will be used for the earlier models, but we're going to have different plumbing. With this one, you're going to get 2 stainless steel hard lines, and I'll show you how those connect. I'm going to give you the hardware required. Oh, I forgot something. Hold, please. All right. You're going to get 2 compression fittings because we do have to cut some existing lines so that we can terminate them with these compression fittings, add our hard lines so that we connect into the new HydrosPlus larger cooler. You got the hardware. This is a stabilizer bracket. I'm going to provide a cutter, not because it's something you couldn't go find. You can find this at every hardware store for the most part. But once you get this in the mail, I don't want you to have to do that. A lot of people are going to have this already. So what I'm really trying to avoid probably is people trying to saw this thing off with a Sawzall and maybe damaging something else. I want everybody to have the best experience. I'm going to send that with you. Use it or don't use it, but it's available for you. And here's an optional piece, and I'll show you what we're going to use these for once we get into the install. These are tube nuts for JIC, but again, 99.9% of the people are not going to use this. Probably about 50% aren't going to use this because they're going to have their own or some other clever method of cutting things, but the rest of the stuff will need to be used in order to get this on your tractor. So that's what's in the box. Let's jump over to the shop and I'll show you how this works. All right, we are in the shop ready to do this install, and as you can tell, I've already got HydrosPlus Cooler Plus on. So the first part of this, I'm going to bring it back to close to stock because I've already cut the lines, so I won't have it to a point where it's exactly connected the way yours is, but you'll be able to get the gist of what we're doing. And if you've seen the previous video, really that video gives you enough information to do the install. The difference is these tubes here, these are the final versions of the tubes. When I did that video, I had hoses and they were going across in different places, just trying to make sure, one, that it worked, but two, figuring out what is the right configuration for this. And of course, we want to go with hard lines anytime we can, but that's not always the case if you need some flexibility. Now on these, the ones that I have here, these are prototypes, so these are actually a little taller than the ones that you will get. This one actually does touch the hood here, just barely, but it does touch it. So I basically shortened this. The reason it's tall like this, you might say, well, why didn't you just shorten it to start with, is because I originally wanted to use a paraflange, which a paraflange is where you take the tube and they have this thing that goes around it, and they use the end of the tube to make the face for the O-ring face seal. But you have to have enough tube to hold on to make that flange. Not that it couldn't be done, but that's basically what they offered me to be able to do it, you know, after the fact, after they bend it, which is better for them. And because of that, we have to go with a brazed on fitting. Works the same, won't be any change for anybody, but these won't look exactly like the ones you have. So let me answer a couple of questions, and then because I've already got it in this configuration, and then we'll jump into the install. The first one is, it is a little tighter, but you do have enough room in here. You can jump off this battery here. You can, you know, whether it's you're jumping somebody else or they're jumping you, you have access to get full-size cables in here. If you do trickle charge or anything like that, yes, you can get to all of this, no problem at all. Second question that I know I've seen is, does the LED lights for the later versions work with this? And the answer is yes. The LEDs are actually shorter. They're actually probably the same as this, but they don't have the plug on the back here. This has the plug on the back directly into the bulb. I think the LED have their wiring somewhere else. Now, if you do have an LED bulb that protrudes more than about 1 inch more than the stock one, then you might have an issue with interference here. We've got plenty of room here to basically unplug this, take it off, and then put it back on. So if you're running aftermarket, if you're running aftermarket LED light bulbs and they're longer and they don't have like a 90 on them, then that could be a problem that you'll have to address, either get different bulbs or go back to the stock bulbs. So that's really the two questions that I know that I've heard probably the most. Now, maybe the third most is, how do you change your battery? Well, your battery is going to be changed in a much different way today, maybe, than what the service manual recommends. For the stock version, the service manual recommends that you take this loose, you take one of these lights off, and then you get access to the battery, and somehow you heave it out of this hole here and then reinstall it. I'm sure that's something you can do, but to me that seems like a really heavy battery to get all the way down and pull it out this tiny hole. Given I actually think it's pretty easy to take this shroud off, probably easier than taking this light bulb off, as long as you're willing to take a few bolts out. Now, I won't argue with anybody if they say, no, that's not easier. I'm just saying that it's actually easier than I expected to take this off. And anytime I've taken a light fixture off, there's always a spring or something that I end up having trouble with. So anyway, that's my point of view. My mind can be changed, but if you go with HydrosPlus, Cooler Plus, I do think that the best and maybe only way to change the battery is to take the shroud off. You're going to do that once every 5 to 6, 7, maybe 8 years, depending on how much you use your tractor. I don't think that's really a deal breaker for most of you that would be interested in this. Now, last thing I'll mention, it's possible that you could take this tube off and move it out of the way and take loose that and then pull this out, and then you could change your battery without taking the shroud off. I doubt that's easier than just taking the shroud off, and I'll explain why as we get into it. Now, from there, let's talk about how do we get this thing ready for install. Let me put one thing back on here. So we've got this little chin here, and as you probably have already noticed, there's no loader on this tractor, and I took the brush guard off. Can you do it with the brush guard on? My guess is yes, but it's very easy to take off. I think I would recommend that you take it off. Once you get to this stage, you're going to want to take this off because, and again, maybe not impossible, but there are bolts, and I think there are 2, 3, 4, I think there are 8. They're either 6 or 8. I don't have mine in right now, and so and in case I lost one, I don't know for sure, but it'll be very obvious which bolts to take off. But before you start anything, take this chin off. It's got 2, well, take the side panel off and then take this chin off. You've got 2 bolts here, 2 on the other side, and then this just comes off. Mostly cosmetic, but you need to take it off because it's hard to get access to some of these bolts without taking it off. Now, there are some, mine's actually loose, there are 2 carriage bolts on this side and that side. Those do not have to come off. They can stay on. I didn't even tighten that one. But the bolts that come off look just like the ones that are here. There's one here. Like I said, I think there are two, 3 or 4 across the front, 2 on the side, and then another one here. Once you get all of those bolts off, you will be ready to essentially grab this and start pulling up. And the way this comes off, it's obviously secured by the bolt here and the bolts at the bottom, but it also has to slide behind these 2 brackets, and they're the same on both sides. Now the bolts that I mentioned, here's the carriage bolts. Actually, I took those off. I took those off a while back and I never put the bolts back on. But the bolts that you're gonna take off, so there's 1, 2 here that go into this, 3, I think, yeah, 4, 5, 6, and then there's 7, 8. So there's 8 bolts there, 2, 4, 8, yeah. And then the 2 at the top, and then that's all you've got. You don't have to take these bolts off, any of the firewall. That's not really a firewall, but the bolts on the wall the radiator is connected to. So obviously with a friend, this would be easier, and also not having to hold a camera, this would be easier. Basically, you just slide up. Now, as you do this, even with the stock tractor, you're probably gonna hang up just a little bit on your battery here. So keep that in mind. If you're trying to pull up on it and you're not making any progress, again, I'm one-handed man here, but push in on the battery. Let's try this. And then once you make it above the battery here, then you're kind of home free. Shall I try this with one hand? Oh, take this loose. Take your headlights loose, and also take a picture of exactly where they were connected. I didn't do that. I know it's connected here and here, and there's another one connected here and here. Take a picture of that. But you can see, I mean, I've got one hand. Come on. Oh, lost it. There we go. Look, one-handed. I took this off. So, pretty straightforward. Again, the bolts were here, and then you've got a couple of wires here. These are important, not when you're taking it off, maybe it gets hung up on them, but when you're putting it back, make sure that they're kind of tucked in here, because as this goes down, it's gonna hit basically right there. So that is, once you have HydrosPlus on, this is how you're gonna change your battery. You take that shroud off, no problem at all. Loosen these, loosen this. There'll be a strap over here. There's a vent tube for your battery there, and then take it off, put it back on, and then reverse order, shove it back down. You'll be good to go. All right, I've got this mocked up back to the way you will see it when you have a stock tractor. Now, of course, I have the battery, which goes here, out of the way. This is where the bungee strap, which I don't actually keep on my tractor, but you'll have a bungee strap that's hooked here and here, I think. And then this hole here is where your vent will go out. So you have your battery here. So I got that out of the way. And before we jump into it, I think this is a good time to talk to you about the optional pieces that I sent. I sent 2 of these flare nuts, right? Now, keep in mind, this circuit at this point is on the return side of your steering. So in this circuit total, the max pressure you'll ever see in this circuit is about 1,000 PSI on this tractor. It's a little bit higher for others, but somewhere between, I'll say 1,000 and 1,200 PSI. And that's based on a pressure relief valve that is in the orbital control valve of the steering. But that is on that side between here and the steering. You'll only be low pressure. This is just the return line. Between the pump and the steering, you could see as high as 1,000 PSI. So I'm telling you that because if you do decide to use this flare nut and do your own flaring, don't fret too much about, whether you do it perfectly. Obviously you want to do a good job, but if we're not flaring it for a 10,000 PSI circuit. We're flaring it for really about a 200 PSI circuit max. If it gets over 200 PSI, this guy right here is going to have more trouble. So as you can see, the reason I included these nuts, if you look here, you can see that once we put these on, and I'll talk about those just in a minute, you can take your pieces that you cut off, that you will have to cut off, put your flare nut, well, you'll actually cut them to size. I actually showed the cut here because when we cut them off, it'll actually be cut off somewhere like here. So it'll be a little bit too long if it has this piece on it. So we'll cut it to length, put your flare nut on like this, and then use a tool. You can get a cheap one on Amazon. You can probably have a buddy that has one if you don't already have one, and you can teach yourself to flare. This will flare mild steel, copper. Now, with steel, you're gonna have to do it probably 2 or 3 times, but you can get it flared well enough so that you can put it on here. And you could go back to effectively the stock hydraulic cooler if you wanted to. I'm not sure why anybody would want to unless you were selling it and somebody said, I don't want the bigger cooler, I want the regular one on. Of course, you always have the option to replace these lines. They actually go through and back that way. I think both of them together are like 180 or something like that for the pair. So if you wanted to go absolutely completely stock, you could do that as well. So now that I've showed you this, I've already done it on the side. Loosen this. Now, I just kind of have this mocked on here, so don't pay attention to that when something falls like that. So now that we have it, what you'll do is you'll take both lines off. And remember, these are just going to be coming through and connecting directly here. You won't have this because we're doing this after the fact. And once you take these off, they'll just be standing here. I guess I should have kept this one on here. Oh, come on. There we go. They'll just be standing up like this, right? This will fall to the bottom. So those will be there. Take this bolt loose, take the nut that's on the other side of this, take this guy out, and then take the 2 top bolts, which are actually carriage bolts. I have these in just as the mock-up. And then remove your stock hydraulic cooler. Now, what we're going to do next, is put the HydrosPlus version on because we need to know where we want to make our cuts. So go ahead and take, if you haven't already done that, take this screen out, and this screen will stay as a part of your tractor to be a barrier between these two. It'll probably be less important. More of the chaff and stuff chaff will go against the front of it, but just in case you do get stuff in the middle, you'll be able to pull this out. Let me get these out of the way. And at this point, go ahead and put the bolts that are provided. Go ahead and put 2 of these in from the back side. Can you see this? Oh, sorry, I better check. There, yeah, you can see that. From the back side, put these in because that's where we're going to hang our HydrosPlus Cooler Plus in order to do the measuring. So let me get that close here and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to readjust the camera. Now my cooler is full of fluid. I probably should just go with a different one, but we'll see how much we spill. Now, you'll have, I'm going to use the ones that are non-nylon because I've got this. You'll have nylon nuts and you'll have washers, but that's not important at this point. What's important is that we actually hang this up here and we have it stay. Okay. Since yours will be a lighter weight, it won't be quite as hard. Rather than that. So we've got it hung up there. And of course, you've got both of these lines here. If they should be right at the bottom of this, but if they're a little bit longer, because these do move up and down a little bit, you can just kind of tuck them behind so that you can put this where it goes. And once we're to this point, what we want to do is install these two hard lines that are in the kit. So of course you're going to have some covers on this, you'll take those off. Make sure your O-rings are in there. But go ahead and put these on and snug them down. You can do it by hand, but just make sure they're already down to the, or all the way down to the O-ring so that the measurement is accurate. Okay. All right, now that we're zoomed in here just a bit, go ahead and install this piece as well. And again, it doesn't have to be super tight, but do snug it to a point that you know that the length is accurate. Now that we have this, pull this part off, and this is the compression fitting side, right? It'll have this this ferrule, and the fat part will go into this nut, and then once this tightens in, then it's going to crimp itself against the actual tube, and it is not removable. At that point, you have to cut the tube. So now that we've got this assembly in, are we close enough? Let me zoom in even more. Okay. So I'm going to remove this because it's a little bit probably distracting. But as you can see, now mine's a little bit different, and I can just push this down and make this work for mine. But ultimately what you want to do is kind of in a neutral position here, make a measurement and make a mark. This, where'd my ferrule go? This ferrule will go down on it, and you can see it should actually come in about in this area. So what I would do is actually make my mark just almost even with the bottom of this, maybe just a little bit up since you know that it'll move some, and make a mark so that we can make a cut. Make it on this side, go ahead and do it on this side as well. Make your mark, and then you can leave everything in place if you want, or you can get some of this out of the way and make a cut. I would at least remove this line here because you are going to want this. Once you have your cutter, of course, I'm not going to demonstrate this piece, but this compact cutter is intentional so that you can get a full circle around it while having it on the tractor, not having to kind of manipulate it or pull it out. You'll be able to have plenty of room. This is going to take just a minute. I mean, this is not, I mean, I guess it's a good enough cutter, but it's not, you know, most of these, it has a small wheel here. So you might find yourself as you're doing it, you have to take some pliers to get the kind of pressure you might need it, depending on what your grip strength is. But just take it patiently, keep going around. Remember, every couple of rounds, just give it a little bit of a turn, and eventually you'll get through it. This shouldn't create any shavings, so you don't really have any concern about anything getting into the hydraulic lines here. Even if they did, their next stop is most likely the sump. There is a very small chance it could go to the hydrostat, but with a tool like this, you're really not expected to have really any shavings. So make that cut on the spot that you marked. Take your ferrule, well, take your nut, put it down, put your ferrule in with the big piece down like this, and it'll be ready for this piece. Wish I could take it off here. And then bottom this out on the tube, okay? And then bring this up and start to tighten it, and keeping as best you can this top piece bottomed out. It wouldn't have to be absolutely, but it's just ideal that it's pushed down. And as you get, now I've already crushed my ferrule up against it, so yours won't tighten quite this far by hand. Once you get to that point, take your wrench, and you'll need 2 of them, and basically crush that ferrule onto the tube. And like I said before, as you can see on mine, it doesn't look like this one because it's fat on this side, and it's also shortened because it's crushed against the tube, and that will not come off once you do this. This is good up to, I want to say it's 5,000 PSI, so no worries about anything there. All right, so we've got this, and we've done it on both sides. And again, you can leave, see this, back up. You can leave this in place. I don't think there's any reason to take it off now that I think about it. And we'll go ahead and connect things and start to secure it. So let me get another camera angle and I'll show you that piece. All right, so I went ahead and put everything back together because it's pretty simple. Since we didn't take this off, all I needed to do, you won't have this problem, but I didn't put the nylon nuts on here, so I put those on and snug those down to the final torque. Same here. In the final torque probably being 20, 25 foot-pounds like you would typically do a bolt like this. It does have a nylon retainer, so that should take care of that. Now I also put these on, and in the process, let's smoothly go down here. Come on. Oh, that wasn't very smooth. For both of these, mine were already done, but what you would need to have done is put your nut on your ferrule, put this on, crush your ferrule against the tube, and then attach this. Now, one thing I'll call out also, here, you almost see how this kind of comes down and goes back up a little bit almost. That's because I've had a couple of different prototypes and I had already cut my tube, so I was stuck with what I had cut. One of the nuts I had here. I could have went shorter, but I didn't think that was necessary at this point. So all I did was just make a little bit of a bend. The same thing could be said for the other way. Say, for instance, you cut it just a little bit too short, you lost your mark, whatever happened, and you cut it shorter, and now you're not quite there. This is a stainless tube. Gently pull down on this. You can make some additional distance here for yourself, and you'll be able to connect it. The only issue would be is if you got below like this grommet, that's going to be really hard to deal with. I don't think anybody's going to have that trouble. All right, so let me scoot over here. This will be the last thing that we need to do, and that is to connect the brace. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this nut out of the bottom, the bolt. And I'd already put my, one thing you probably do want to do, it will make it a little bit hard. If you haven't put this bolt in from the back side, try to do that as you hang this up so that whenever you're ready to put this on, it's already sticking out there. So this bolt, this is a little different than the previous one. It's going to come in from the bottom here, and we're going to cinch it down. The one you had before looked like this, and it had a shoulder and some threads on the bottom. This is just the reverse of that, but it works the same way. So we'll snug this down and then eventually tighten it down. But go ahead and put your washer here. And then your nut. Now this is probably the only bolt that if you try to do anything without taking the shroud off, this is going to be the one that's hard to get to. Everything else is going to be simple to get to. Obviously this would be impossible to get to, but anything that you would need to take the cooler off, this is the bolt that's going to give you trouble. Now, that said, what you can do, especially after you've already put it on, is leave it on. Go ahead and take the bolt out of here, and you could take this brace and everything out so that, you know, if you needed to take this out, I mentioned earlier, if you wanted to potentially try to change the battery without taking the shroud off, you might be able to get it out if you take the cooler out. So let me snug this up, and then we'll get to the point where we put the shroud back on. All right. Batteries in. I mentioned I do not put the strap on mine. I just don't think it's necessary, and if I ever have to get it out of there, I'd end up fighting with it. But put your strap back on. You have this vent tube here, run it through here. Now your negative line, you might want to run it between this brace. Probably doesn't matter, but I'm running it between because as the shroud comes down, it's going to rest right here, and having everything inside is going to make it easier to put that on. Now, to that point, we get over here to this other side, make sure that you've got your lighting wiring. I basically put it kind of back through the middle here, and that this is as much as you can. Actually, there's a, this may, I didn't actually remember this. I don't know where this connects. I don't know if I ever knew where it connected. Might be something to look for, but make sure your wiring is as close in as it can be. So before I put the shroud back on, I'll go ahead and mention that this could happen to you. I don't know when I did this, but if you're not familiar with exactly how these coolers are constructed, or radiators even, it's basically all the same. These fins are for cooling, but they don't, if you were to break that fin or poke a hole through all those fins, you wouldn't have any issue. It would still be just fine because the fluid actually runs through these pieces, and they're a lot tougher. Now they can get pierced, of course, but ideally these fins wouldn't be bent in like this. So if you do notice that the fins are bent in, you can take like a small screwdriver and you can just straighten them out, just so the air, just gently do this so the air can get through there. And you know, if you don't feel like you have a screwdriver that is quite small enough, you can use anything. Like I would typically use a pick, but you can actually use something like a screw for that matter. And just best you can. They're only going to be mangled here on the end. The other part will be fine, just enough so you can get air through there. That's not going to make a material difference. They do make some combs that you can buy, you may already have, that may or may not work. Something like this, you're not even worried about. If you had all of these, you know, bent in and air couldn't really flow through very much, then that would be something to worry about. Give me a call, we'll figure something out. But really, you know, you might see something, oh, you can't see it. If you saw something like this, you know, that's just, these things are so delicate, that can happen. You may see it that way, but if you get one that's shipped to you and a lot of these are bent in and it's, you know, you're not going to be able to straighten them out very good, let me know. That shouldn't be the case, but I won't say it's impossible. We're going to put the shroud back on. I'm not really sure what's the best angle to show you. You'll figure it out. It's not terribly hard to do, but a couple of points. Put this in the middle. I think I've already mentioned that. And on the wires on the side, on this side as well as the other, kind of keep them inside. There's some, let's see this, oh, there's some holes here. That's where we'll actually bolt it in. So keep the wires inside there best you can. And remember, we've got to get this, there's a groove. Let's see if I can see it. There's a groove right here. Now this is the opposite side, but it essentially goes here, and this holds it there. Now, it is also possible that while you're doing this, you just say feels like it's getting in the way. You can take this loose and kind of push it in, or push it, you know, turn it to the side just a bit. But for the most part, you should be able to get it on there. The biggest problem that I end up having is actually, let's get this in here. So I got this one started. So I'm gonna go to the other side and try and get it started. The biggest problem I run into is actually the hood. The hood getting in there. Okay. So I've got it slid into both sides. And these will be right now, because this kind of curves in, it's actually going to run up against this. So you'll have to coax it down. If you have a friend, you can do it too. But once you get a little bit further down here, it'll seem to do a little love tap. Come on. And obviously, oh, here it is. When it won't go, don't try to force it because it actually goes pretty easy. And if it's not going, something is in the way. This is the thing that will get in the way. I want to pause. Okay. This is going to get in the way. What you'll need to do is just, and you can do this even if it has the strap on it. I didn't even have mine all the way back, but you'll have to basically lift the front just ever so slightly so that you can get this little edge past it. See? All right, don't make a fool out of me. There we go. Just get it where it won't hang. It's easier if you don't have to try to do it for a camera. There we go. And slides in. Simple as that. That's really the only thing it's going to hang up on. It'll rub on these as it goes down. And then it's going to hang on the battery. Just tilt it back just a little bit. And then once it gets past it, it's going to go all the way down. You can tell these bolt holes would be in alignment, so we'll add those bolts back. Of course, put the bolts in the bottom, put the chin back on, put the brush guard back on, and then here, oh, sorry about that. Here, let's see here. There we go. Here, then just plug in your lights. I just got back. Okay, this light goes over here. It won't matter which one. It's not like it's a turn signal, but plug those babies in, and boom. You are done. All right, that's it. HydrosPlus Cooler Plus. Mine's clearly dirty. I've been running it for a few months. In some pretty dusty conditions, and I probably could have done a better job of washing it down before we did the install, but you know, not really my style. If you're interested in this, again, this one's for the later Model 1 series and 2025R. The earlier versions of those, they're likely to have some type of hard line that comes up here, but there's going to be, the connections are actually adapters into this area, so we won't have to cut any lines. We can just add some lines to it. That'll be nice, except it does connect slightly differently. I do expect to likely put this on the 2R large frame and 3E eventually. I don't feel the strong need to do that even with continuous run hydraulic motors at this point, because both of those run about 6 gallons of fluid. That in and of itself is going to have a significant cooling effect, but they do run a relatively small cooler, so having something like this will be nice on those models in the future and keep your hydraulic fluid healthier and your components in better shape. So if this is something you're interested in, visit HydrosPlus.com. If you have questions or comments, leave them below. Thanks for watching.